Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to my channel and finding your path to your best emotional and physical health, and a continuation of our series on healing from complex PTSD and childhood trauma. So if you haven't watched some of those videos or this is the first one you've seen, please click on some of the links that you'll see throughout the videos and subscribe to my channel so you'll get notified when new videos come out, and take a look at what else has come out in the past that talks about complex PTSD and how it affects current relationships and how to work through those so that you can have a healthier, happier life. So also, don't forget to download my 5 free videos that are linked below that will kind of help you lay the foundation to your overall physical and emotional health. Okay, so let's get into today's topic. It's not a huge long one, but it's kind of an introduction to kind of a bigger topic, which we'll get into a little more detail in another video. We've been talking about how to heal the outer critic and to kind of how we're going to kind of heal through some of these childhood things. And one of the big things is grieving, and sometimes getting people through that grieving process is a challenge for a therapist, because they sometimes get stuck and are afraid to do that because of other messages that they've been told to not grieve or not feel or whatever. And that's the inner critic. So that sometimes is kind of interrupting the whole process. So we'll kind of get into that in a minute. So grieving the loss of childhood expectations and the things that you didn't get when you were a kid is really, really important, because it's kind of deaths of part of yourself that have helped you survive your childhood. So the way you interpreted the world and the way you worked with others was developed, and the foundation was laid by your parents. So when that was fractured, there was difficulties, there are issues in that, and then people have a hard time kind of letting go of that, because that's a part of yourself that helped you survive. So even though it doesn't serve you a purpose now, or may actually be interfering with relationships, that is something that is definitely a challenge for some people, because even though they can see that it doesn't work, letting go of it for the few times it does work is really, really, really scary. So that's why we hold space and make people feel safe while they do that through this process, either through coaching or therapy or whatever form you choose. So grieving, there's 4 practices of grieving, and we're not going to get into the details in this video, so make sure you stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be in more detail. And those are angering, crying, verbal venting, and feeling. And I think some of you can probably guess which one of those are a little bit harder for some people to do. And everybody has a little bit of a different one that they struggle with. So they can, even if they grieve and cry and you think they've moved through it, and the angering as well. I know a lot of patients get angry at their parents, but it doesn't finally help them let go, because there's some other piece that's missing. And they are usually because they're stuck back in the inner critic. And I mentioned earlier that the inner critic is one that disrupts the grieving process. But again, that goes back to all the messages we've been told about you shouldn't feel, you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't all over themselves, that's kind of things. So kind of working through that inner critic piece and deconstructing that will allow the grieving process to move forward. So we kind of get people unstuck a little bit that way. So just briefly, I want people to think about some of the nurturances that we're supposed to get as children that we don't always get. And we may get, there's 4 main ones, and they may get all 4, they may get 2 out of 4, they may get 1, whatever. There can be some real basic ones, but if you think about these nurturances, they carry into our current relationships even as adults. So if you don't get these 4 things from either your spouse and or your friends, which can be important too, you can get nurturance from several different places, then you may struggle in relationships. So kind of understanding what you were missing as a child, where you get these nurturances now, and how you can kind of foster them is really kind of important to your overall relationships. So the very first one is verbal nurturance. The ideal parent, and I'm not saying that every parent needs to be ideal, because every parent makes mistakes, and it's important to learn and kind of move through that. So the verbal nurturance is the praise the acknowledgement, the positive feedback, the ability to entertain questions. You know, everybody has had a little kid, if you've had children, that is like asks a million questions, right? And they ask why, and they want to know all these things. Well, when parents shut them down as that their questions are not important or not necessary, and it doesn't mean that they can't set a boundary and say, you know, I can't talk about this right now, but let's go back to that. Then you're redirecting the energy to a different time, and of course, maybe the kid doesn't remember, and they'll come back with another question later. But that's a totally different message than I'm not going to answer your question right now. So that's that verbal nurturance of being available to kind of help the child develop cognitively. The second one is spiritual, which is about seeing and reflecting worth, goodness, and loving nature, and helping a child see that they have worth. A lot of patients, of course, because as I do therapy, I end up with patients that really struggle with self-worth because they didn't get enough of this. And this one is a little bit more abstract, so it's kind of like, well, how do you do that? And how do I reflect that? And there's certain things you might say, and like I said, the way you deliver the verbal nurturance, which can help that as well. So that's a spiritual nurturance. Emotional nurturance is meeting the child consistently with regards to what they need, their interests, and helping them kind of foster that, you know, and helping them accept emotions and move through them. Too often we have people that are like, you know, oh, you can't feel that way, you can't think that way, you can't do whatever, and they don't foster the individuality of the child, and then they have issues because they haven't been provided with that consistent feedback. And then if you've watched some of my earlier videos regarding disorganized attachment and some of the parenting that drives that, and they just have a really inconsistent response to the child. So there's some of the nurturance might be there, but if it's inconsistent, it's a problem, because then the child doesn't feel that it's reliable, and that's one of the ways they start to feel like people are dangerous. And the last one is physical nurturance. And of course, the basis of that is the protection piece, right? And helping them make sure their basic needs are met, place to live, diet, sleep, whatever. But it's also affection and being able to hug a child or hold them or hold their hand when they're crossing the street, those kinds of things. The affection and protection are the two big ones. And sometimes those are divided amongst the parents. Sometimes in traditional senses, you might see that the mother is kind of responsible for that affection, and that's much more common in women. These are the ones that give the affection, the hugs, let me kiss your boo-boo, that kind of thing. And the father is kind of programmed and has that kind of expectation to be more protective in nature. And some of that's just part of the way we are as men and women, and part of that is our culture. This kind of depends on where you grow up. And so single parents have to learn how to provide both. And you kind of have to make sure that both of those are there when they need them, so that they can provide consistency. I know many children of divorced parents where they had a really good connection with one parent because they provided these things, and a not so good connection with the other parent because they didn't provide that. Now, luckily, it only takes one. So when they have at least one parent that teaches them things are okay, they have a much better chance of parlaying that into the future and interacting more healthy in relationships in the future. So with that, I want you to think about some of those things and nurturances for children and what you may or may not have received in the past. And then we'll get into some of the stages of grieving and how we can move forward with that in our next video. So if you feel you need any coaching around this, please connect with me on the website, and we will get you fixed up and moving forward in your life. Thank you so much, and have a great day.